Night, my lady, an audiofic written and voiced by Bevy Draws. There were a lot of perks to being married to such an amazing, creative, and hardworking woman, but Adrian's favorite perk had to be seeing all of the different sides of Marinette. He got to see the good, the bad, the messy, and in this case, the sleepy. After a long day of working at the MDC fashion head office, Adrian was exhausted. There was a line that was due to be put on display soon, and as the deadline got closer, Marinette was stressing more and more about whether or not the designs she had chosen were good enough. Wanting to give Marinette the space to fix things as she pleased, Adrian had agreed to handle all of the more business-oriented details. Marinette, thankful for the help, had holed herself away in her personal studio that had been set up in their apartment. Adrian walked down the hallway towards said studio as quietly as he could. Despite his exhaustion, he wanted nothing more than to check in on Marinette to make sure she hadn't overworked herself. Once he had reached the door to her studio, he was met with a sight that made his heart melt and had him fighting back laughter. Gentle music was playing from her phone that had somehow gotten knocked to the floor, along with a few other pieces of paper. Marinette was slumped over her desk, snoring softly. Her hair, that was usually in a neat bun, was now a mess, likely from fiddling and pulling at it out of frustration, and her usually neat eyeliner was now smudged under her eyes. In all honesty, Adrian had never seen anyone more beautiful. He took a few more seconds to appreciate the view before entering the room. Picking up Marinette's phone, he turned off the music and placed it in his pocket to plug it in later. He picked up the papers that were knocked to the floor and put them to the side for Marinette to sort through in the morning. Having that done, he gently lifted Marinette into his arms, her head falling softly against his shoulder. He snorted when he saw the drool leaving her mouth. Smiling down at her and making sure she was secure in his arms, he made his way towards their bedroom. Not even halfway down the hallway, two little figures flew up to him and settled softly on his shoulder. Both Kwamis peered down at Marinette. "She always works herself too hard," Tiki scolded softly, despite knowing Marinette couldn't hear her. "I hope she's not too tired to make me food tomorrow," remarked Plag sarcastically, not willing to directly admit his concern for anyone. Adrian let out a tiny huff of laughter, pushing open the bedroom door and moving around to Marinette's side of the bed. "You both know she's been stressing out over this project. She always gets like this near the deadline." Without being asked, Tiki and Plag pulled back the covers on the bed so Adrian could lay Marinette down. As Adrian plugged in Marinette's phone and reached into the nightstand to get a makeup remover wipe, Plag spoke up again. Well, they'd be stupid to not like her design, so she should just quit worrying about it. He crossed his tiny arms, looking away indignantly, like he hadn't just praised Marinette. Tiki giggled. "How about you and I go tidy up her studio a little bit so she has less to worry about tomorrow morning? We can even look through her designs and put your favorites at the top of her idea pile." It took all Adrian had not to start laughing hysterically at the way Plag's ears betrayed his excitement at the prospect of helping Marinette. With a half-hearted huff, he flew off towards Marinette's studio. Tiki offered Adrian a soft, "Good night," before following behind him. Adrian turned his attention back towards Marinette, who was still sleeping soundly, and gently began wiping the makeup off of her face. Despite being dead tired, her face still scrunched up in distaste at the feeling of the wet wipe. Adrian smiled as he wiped off as much of her makeup as he could without fully waking her. When he was done, he placed his free hand on her cheek and gently ran his thumb along her now prominent freckles. He was taking a moment to silently thank the universe for allowing him the privilege of spending the rest of his life with someone so beautiful when Marinette broke his thoughts with a louder than usual snore. With a lovesick grin on his face, Adrian disposed of the makeup wipe and moved back to where Marinette was laying. He noticed she was still wearing her slippers, so he gently removed them from her feet and set them on the floor, right where her legs usually hang off the bed when she got up in the morning. He carefully took her hair out of its messy bun, setting the rubber band on the nightstand. Nodding at his handiwork, Adrian finally pulled the blankets over her and tucked them around her shoulders. He lifted the bottom corner of the blanket to expose one of her legs as she often slept, claiming that she would overheat otherwise. Marinette snuggled farther into the blankets, making a contented sound. Adrian smiled, softer this time, before walking to the kitchen. He grabbed 2 water bottles and a granola bar. He wasn't sure how hungry Marinette would be in the morning, and wanted to make sure she had something to hold her over until he managed to make some breakfast for her. He returned to their room, put a water bottle and her granola bar on her side, before he made his way around to his side of the bed. Adrian kicked his shoes off and got ready for bed before slowly sliding under the covers. He was long since exhausted from endless meetings and desperate for some much-needed sleep. Despite his best efforts to not move the bed too much, Marinette still stirred at the slight shifting. He rolled over, her left hand coming up to rest on the pillow as she mumbled something in her sleep that sounded a lot like she was calling for her lucky charm. Adrian couldn't resist, reaching out to gently hold her hand, his fingers brushing lightly over her wedding band and ruby engagement ring. He was incredibly grateful for his enhanced night vision, likely a side effect of his many years as chat noir. Thanks to that, he was able to see the way her now loose hair splayed wildly around her face, looking ethereal in all of her exhausted glory. He brought her hand to his mouth, kissing it gently before closing his eyes. The last thing out of his mouth before falling asleep himself was a soft, "Good night, my lady."